up, Heart of Travelers? Oh my God, one of the things I love the most about working for myself and from home is being able to record these Loom videos from the comfort of my own bedroom when I have a cold. If you know me, you know that I love to get a good bed work session in. And I'm so excited that people were interested in seeing the results from this market research survey that we ran because I personally find the results to be super interesting. A lot of this stuff was pretty much like validating things that we have already observed, but there were definitely some surprises in here as well. And I'm so glad that we did this. And I'm really grateful to everybody who took the time to fill it out. If you are interested, we can still collect more responses. But right now we have 60 people who have participated in this research survey. And I'm going to go through and just give a little breakdown on what have some of the results been and what that might mean for some changes at Heart of Travel moving forward. So really excited. Okay, so when do people typically start planning and booking when it comes to joining a small group multi-day tour? So this went against information that was found in a recent survey that was done on a way bigger scale, like an industry-wide survey that found last minute bookings and including even the last month before to be currently at like 24%, around 24% of the booking like habit of all people booking travel. And this does not reflect that. So it could just be that our pool is really small. Or that our traveler is somebody who is planning a little bit further ahead and not quite as spontaneous. And I will say that this surprised me a little bit because from what we see on our end, we do get a high volume of last minute bookings. So I don't know how much this data is going to align with the reality of consumer habits, but it's interesting to see at least the consumer's perspective of when they in their mind envision that they are typically booking their trips out. So you can see that 6 to 12 months before departure was what most people selected. And we feel that for our trips, the 3 to 6 month period is probably the top time. And then this 1 to 3. And then I would say 6 to 12 months is like third place. As an operator, 6 to 12 months, we love. And quite frankly, the more that people start booking tours in advance with us, then we might actually be able to drop prices moving forward because when you're able to lock things in with that lead time, you can often, for us, like on our end, we can get better deals and make the trip be potentially less costly for our travelers. So please book ahead of time. Like right now, we've been experiencing so many bookings here in the 1 to 6 months, which even 3 to 6 months is still really good for us. But the 6 to 12 months, like, oh my gosh, I would love, 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 love. And we do have that for some of our bigger ticket items like Spain, but I bet a ton of people will sign up here for Spain. It would be rare for Spain to be in this area. Anyways, it's just really interesting to see not that many people are booking more than a year out. Um, and nobody was booking like 18 months out. Well, I guess, yeah, there was nobody there. And then some people said it could depend on the destination. Obviously, if it's a closer destination and a shorter trip, last minute booking or less notice was more common. Okay, what trip duration do you find most appealing and doable with your schedule? Check all that apply. This was really interesting to me, and I think something that is important for us to see because a lot of our trips historically have fallen in this 8 to 12 night, but we're seeing that there's really a demand for 5 to 7 and even shorter than that. Personally, for me, like, I just wouldn't necessarily want to go to most places for such a short period of time, but there are destinations where that can make sense. And some people obviously have a lot more limited schedule flexibility. So for us to see this is really helpful because since so many of us who work in this travel space don't necessarily have the same schedule rigidity that people have in other industries, um, I forget that this is like a huge reality for people. And what we've started doing is realizing that there are people who really do want to go to a country like, say, Cuba, maybe more than once, and they just can't go for more than 5 or 6 days at a time. So we've been starting to build itineraries with the mind or the idea that you could do one and do anywhere from a 3 to a 6 day 6 night trip to Cuba, and then on itinerary 2 you could go to a different part. And this is really cool because it lets you build a deeper relationship with a country and with people in that country, because most likely you're going to be repeating at least a tour with a tour leader or a driver, or there's going to have that feeling of like, I'm going back to a place that I already kind of know and already have a community in. And for me, like, that's been the most beautiful part of traveling and building business in different parts of Latin America, is that I feel like I have like a community and like a little mini life in a lot of these places, because I return, and like every time you go back to a destination, you see that person or those people again, like it just intensifies that bond and really does make the trip become a part of your life beyond just this 5 or 6 days that you're there. So I love repeating destinations, and I totally understand not wanting to do the exact same thing. And so this is really valuable insight for us, because if we know that people are wanting to travel for shorter periods of time, then we can create trips, multiple options for the same country, so that you can pick whatever appeals to you most, or potentially you can go on all of them over the next however many years, you know? So this was really interesting. Also, good to know that not a lot of interest for stuff beyond 13, except for maybe some bucket list trips. So I could see Spain or some South America trips staying in this range. But basically, my takeaway from this is that we need to have a few long weekend trips. We need to have a lot of trips that are like, I think Saturday to Saturday is great for people who are working, because when you arrive on Saturday, usually we don't start an activity until later that day. So a lot of people are flying that morning. Some people fly overnight from Friday, but typically you can still work Friday, travel, arrive at some point on Saturday, and have your 7 night trip, and then leave Saturday, so that when you get home, you have a buffer day on Sunday before work. So the 8 day, 7 nights, I think, are like a really, really great, like probably the most optimal option for a lot of our travelers. And then knowing that we can maybe push it as long as 12 nights on some trips. So this just really helps us to figure out strategically, like, how can we build our itineraries so that they're obviously awesome and epic individually, but also how can we be smart and make it so that if people want to see multiple parts of a country, that they could do it on different trips, and that they wouldn't be missing anything, but they also wouldn't be like duplicating activities. So this is just super insightful for us. Thank you guys for responding to this. Okay, this was interesting. When it comes to multi-day group tours, what type of group dynamic are you looking for? And this didn't shock me. Women only trips, there was a huge demand for that. And so I think we will definitely be having some of our trips be limited to women only. But we still had a really strong interest in the co-ed trips. So the trips that we're basically running now, where there's really no age or gender parameters on them. But this does give us the encouragement to make some trips women only, and definitely keep a lot of co-ed trips as well. This was interesting. Singles trips, I did not expect that to rank so high. So I would love to hear from people on, what do you interpret really with the term singles trips? Like, are you thinking it's a trip where like like the focus is like on the fact that people are single and trying to meet other people? Like, do we want a matchmaking component to this? Or are we just saying like, yo, this is just a trip for somebody who isn't traveling with a significant other, or necessarily with anybody? Well, I think that a singles trip, I feel like it's about that you're single romantically. So like maybe two friends could go on a singles trip together. So I want to explore this, because I think this could be fun, but I think I need to understand more what we all interpret as a singles trip. Is a singles trip a trip where we are looking actively to mingle, and are we wanting to mingle with other people in our group, or do we want to be a group of women or a group of men going on a trip, and we're open to mingling with people in that country? I don't know. This gets complex. I think there might be something here, but I need more information, and I don't want to create like a weird environment either. But uh, interesting that this scored so high. Um, this trip's for all age 18. I'm kind of made a mistake. It's basically the same as this, so the data there is a little bit skewed because of that. It was interesting to see that there were, I'm going to scroll down here, it's easier. There was a heavy interest in trips for people 40 to 59. Couples trips actually had a decent amount of interest. Like we could consider trying one and seeing how it goes. 26 to 39 also had interest. 60 to 74 had less interest, which that used to be our primary demographic, so super interesting. Parent and adult child trips, I love seeing interest in this. I think that we need to do, maybe even if it's just one a year, but that's so cute. Grandparent and grandchild trips wasn't a huge interest, but maybe that will change with time. But yeah, that was interesting. LGBTQ specific trips, low interest. It's something that I think we're super interested in. We maybe aren't there's a lot of companies out there that are already doing this, so maybe that's something that's better to do in collaboration. But interesting to see the data. I would love to see even more interest in that. Family trips wasn't a huge amount of interest for that. That usually comes through in the form of a private tour that we create. So cool. We probably will not be adding any group trips with that focus. And then there were some comments, and I don't know if I can pull them up here. I don't think I can, but I recall that in the comment section, people suggested some different age brackets. And I think one was somebody specifically wanting trips for women ages like 30 to 50 or 35 to 50, something like that. Um, and so just like maybe these age brackets aren't exactly what we're going to go with, but this information is super helpful. I have a huge hesitation to putting an age like limitation on stuff just because I feel like age is really such an interesting concept and doesn't mean like everybody's 50 is different and everybody's 40 is different. Like obviously there's certain commonalities that I think are more or less like indisputable. But there is also a humongous range, and I've seen that over the past 7 years. Like I can think of 15 people in their late 60s, and there's a humongous range there in terms of activity level, interest, like there's just, it's really hard. I think after a certain point, like the difference means less, but I can see people in their maybe late 20s wanting to not be with people over like 45, and maybe people like over 40 maybe not really wanting to deal with people under like 35. So I don't know. Very interesting, the concept of age. I think we're going to have to dig deeper into that. Destination. This was really interesting for me that Argentina was so high. We ran one trip to Argentina last year and it was very successful. And we have since run into a kind of, not a problem, but just Argentina has been going through a lot of changes right now. And so it was really difficult to lock in details and pricing with providers in Argentina until they had their elections at the end of last year. And their new president has now taken in office. And there's just like a lot of stuff that's uncertain in Argentina right now. And that has been making us hesitant to proceed. So we actually paused Argentina. We were going to run 3 trips this year. Seeing this interest obviously highly motivates us to take Argentina back from the back burner and put it up at higher priority. So maybe we'll see a late 2024 Argentina trip, but I think based off of this data, you can assume that there will definitely be a 2025 Argentina trip. Cuba, not surprising. Cuba's a top destination for us. We love Cuba. We have stuff happening in Cuba pretty much every day now. Like this was super reassuring, but not shocking. Guatemala, I'm really happy to see that Guatemala is like top 3 because I think a lot of you know or who have been following us, like most of our team is Guatemalan. Most of our team is still based out of Guatemala. That's where I lived for a really long time. Like Guatemala is the whole reason that this business was even started. So we want to keep sharing Guatemala with people. And so please come to Guatemala if you haven't already. Colombia, Peru, great to see. Pretty much even amount of interest for Guatemala, Colombia, Peru, and Mexico. So that's great. Portugal, that was really interesting. We definitely will not have anything happening in Portugal until maybe second half of 2025, but I just threw it out there just purely to gauge interest, and I was surprised to see that so much came back. Mystery trip. I love this idea. There's a few other tour operators that I know that do this, and it looks so cool. So I think that we're going to try and do maybe at least one in 2025. It will probably be a shorter trip, and I imagine it would be to a destination that maybe a fair amount of people have gone to, but it would definitely be presented in a different way so that even if you had been to that destination, that you wouldn't have necessarily been or done the majority of the stuff that would be on this trip. So that's going to be really interesting. Chile, also interesting. That's probably not happening until 2026. Costa Rica, that's going to happen later this year for sure. Panama, we're slowly easing into Panama, so there could be some Panama late 2024, but you can definitely expect to see Panama 2025. Ecuador, I was surprised this scored so low because we sell a fair amount of Ecuador. I don't know if that could be influenced by the recent kind of uprise and increase of violence that was happening predominantly in the Guayaquil area. But that is a situation that is not going to endure indefinitely and has already kind of gotten collected. So maybe that number is influenced by that, but this surprised me a little bit. I think that people think so much about the Galapagos and like go to Ecuador because of that, but there's so much more that Ecuador has to offer on continental Ecuador. I love Ecuador personally. I prefer Ecuador to Peru. Um don't come at me, please. I love Peru as well, but I was a little surprised to see this so low. Belize, I don't know if and when we'll do anything there. I have mixed feelings about that just because it's not a Spanish speaking country. English is the predominant language, but there is some Spanish spoken and some other indigenous languages there too. But I just don't know. It seems like a less natural addition for us and seeing not too high of interest. I don't think that you should anticipate seeing Belize on our itineraries for a little while at least. Paraguay, awesome to see the interest. Same with Uruguay. Again, that probably wouldn't come until at least 2026 if it does. Nicaragua, low interest. I love Nicaragua. So I could almost see Nicaragua happening before Paraguay and Uruguay just because it would be a more affordable destination, probably a little easier to get to. And we already have knowledge and contact more so than we do in Paraguay and Uruguay. So yeah, Spain, weird that that ranks so low since that trip does pretty well. Uh, I'm not necessarily seeing us ever doing Spain super regularly. I think that Spain is probably going to be a 1 to 2 times a year thing for us unless something changes. So that makes sense. Yeah, all of this makes sense. Puerto Rico, I was really bummed to see that so low because I was hoping to do Puerto Rico. So I might still launch a long weekend in Puerto Rico, maybe, but with this data, I'm a little discouraged. What are the focus areas that you're interested in? I know this loom is going on forever. Sorry, guys. Okay, cultural immersion was huge. Food and beverage was huge. Those are the two that are kind of the most important to me. And so it's cool to see that those are ranking high because I think we're already doing a lot of that. And that's a good encouragement for us to continue keeping our focus there and maybe even expanding. Nature and wildlife, cultural and religious, artisans and artisanal products. Like I'm all of this makes me super happy because it feels very much aligned with what our interests are and what we're focusing the most on building. History, yep, history is important to contextualize these other things. So I love that people are appreciative of that. Hiking and trekking, that actually scored a little higher than I thought. So that's good to see. So it's making me think that maybe a couple itineraries that are a little bit more nature and wellness oriented could be cool. And then these are more specialty things. So, like fine and performing arts only ranked at 39%, but a lot of that also kind of comes in here in the cultural aspect. So, yeah, luxury wasn't super high on people's radar, and neither was spirituality or holistic healing necessarily. So, all really interesting data, but great to see that like really high scores in the areas that already mean the most to us. This was awesome to see what are people really looking to be paying for a trip. And this helps a lot because I think this is going to be a target area, what we want a lot of our trips to be costing. And since we're going to be shortening trips, I think that this is even more viable for us as a company. I think that most of our trips are going to be in this range moving forward. We'll probably still always have some trips in this range and a couple what we would consider like budget trips here. I think that this category will be very limited. I think we will only have a few trips that are over 4,000, and those are going to typically be longer trips and or like bucket list trips where the activity is costly. So something like going to Day of the Dead can only be under 4,000 if the trip isn't that long. Or Galapagos, it's rare that we're going to be underneath the 4,000. Doesn't look like anybody is wanting to go over 5,500. So that feels aligned overall with our audience. And this was really good data to have confirmation on. But yeah, we loved seeing this. And this is going to be a number that is very present for us as we go forward with building out the calendar and our catalog of tours. This was cool. This doesn't give you a lot of information. The comments provided a little bit more, but it didn't seem like there was enough interest in like one particular area for this to happen yet. But what's cool is that we work with other companies that oftentimes have a more specific niche and we help put a tour together for them. And a lot of times those are open collaborations. So what we can do is be better at letting you guys know about, hey, like Heart of Travel is involved in this other trip with this other company if you're interested in going on that because it has a specific focus that we know you would like to do. So like we partner with Flow Yoga Adventures in Cuba, Guatemala, and Oaxaca. So if we know that you're looking for that type of trip and we know that you're interested in those destinations, that's something that we can have in mind, like letting people know when our partners are doing trips with us or even without us that we think would be well aligned for them. So cool, really good. I love this. I love seeing that there are people who are looking to travel 2 to 3 times a year. And I know that might not necessarily be with us all 2 or 3 of those times, but just knowing that there's a large section of our demographic that is looking to travel 2 to 3 times a year is such encouraging data for us, and also just makes me so happy that people are finding a way to prioritize travel and make it happen for them. Like this was such, I loved this. um this was gender. Okay, I knew that we had a really female audience, but this actually did blow me away. I did not think that it was going to be 92.65%. Like that was crazy. Um so as much, and obviously this is just the people who filled out the survey, right? Like I do think that we have more than 5% of our email subscribers are male, but I do think that this is reflective of the direction that we're going in, and that it's just more and more and more every day that women are the dominant like like traveler at Heart of Travel, which is great. Um and that makes sense with we're gonna move forward with some women only trips, but this was just really interesting data. This was also interesting data that I found to be a little bit, disappointing, and that the bulk of the people who are filling out this survey, and this is going to be somewhat reflective of our general audience, is white. And like that's not a problem, like, right? Being white's not the problem, but I would love to see this pie chart getting a little bit more even. So it's good to know though, like that's important for us to know as a company, like why are we maybe not reaching out to people in these other demographics? Is there something that we need to be changing in terms of our like the image that we're projecting? Because we are 100% want to have this pie chart be more even, and we want to make sure that people feel that when they learn about us. So this is definitely going to be something that we take into our 2024 year, particularly when it comes to um just like our general marketing and outreach, and also like making sure that trips are just, designed so that everybody feels that they're accessible to them. So this is a stat that I really want us to work on. I think though, if we were to do population control for the United States, that this might not seem as bad because I think that this is still the dominant overall population in the nation, although that's probably changing. Um, what best describes your professional status? There is obviously like way more layers to this in terms of like industry, and for the self-employed people, some people said like I'm self-employed and but it's full-time. So this data helps, but I don't know how much. But we obviously have a 50% of the people who at least filled out this survey are working a more traditional job schedule. And then we did have a fair amount of self-employed, so I think it could be cool to talk about like maybe there's trips like specifically for people in the small business ownership world. Like that could maybe be really interesting. We still have a fair amount of our community who's retirement, so that's cool. So this was interesting, but definitely reinforces needing to make trips that can be more easily worked into people's schedules. And I feel like again, that Saturday to Saturday is such a good option for people who are employed full time. So that was it. Those were the results. And obviously, it's a relatively small pool, but I found this to be really, really helpful and illuminating. And I hope that we can continue to collect data and creating experiences and trips for people that are aligned with what they want. So, yeah, thank you guys so much. Bye.